Powered by Riverside FM.
Have the Minnesota Vikings fixed their defensive line problems in 2025? Like always, the answer for me is yes. But these are going to be talking points because, again, I'm taking you through each individual unit for the Minnesota Vikings, try to figure out where all these negative narratives are coming from that the Minnesota Vikings are going to be terrible. So when you look at the defensive line 2024, you're talking about names like nose tackle Harrison Phillips, who will be back. You know, he's a reliable anchor for the Minnesota Vikings. But I think he carried too much of the load on the defensive line last year. But definitely a stalwart on the defensive line in 2024. Then you have my guy, Jerry Tillery. He had underwhelming production. And I think the Minnesota Vikings just kind of signed him to be a short-term fix. You got guys like Jonathan Bullard. You got guys like Jacqueline Roy. You got guys like James Lynch. Other guys, Jalen Redmond, LDR, who I hope will get a little bit more playing time this year. LDR, undrafted, free agent, looked really good in the preseason last year. I know he's a guy that they really want to develop within the Minnesota Vikings organization. So I do expect for him to have some sort of role and be back in the fold next year. Taki Taimi, young depth with an upside. The big thing about our defensive line was not that they were terrible, but they really had inconsistent gap control is what I like to call it. And they couldn't stop the run of run-power teams consistently. Like, that was their Achilles heel. That was something that they really, really need to fix. They really couldn't get home by themselves. It's why Brian Flores had to blitz so much. And so now I've called it out, with all of the moving and all of the names that we brought in for that defensive line, UP Nation, I expect for that blitz percentage of Brian Flores, although I still expect him to be Dr. Blitzenstein. That's what he does. I just believe that the Minnesota Vikings won't have to blitz as much as they have in the past. I mean, they've been around safely 40% last couple of years, blitzing around about in that area, so almost half in terms of blitzing. But now the Minnesota Vikings will not have to do that because of the improvements, in my opinion, in their 2025 defensive line. They ranked in the bottom half of the NFC rush defense. So I think that's definitely something that the Minnesota Vikings are looking to fix in 2025. Now, let's look at 2025. As I mentioned, you got nose tackle Harrison Phillips back. But then you add a stud in Jonathan Allen, two-time Pro Bowler, signed from the Washington Redskins, brings toughness, and he brings disruption. Then you got defensive tackle Javon Hargrave, elite pass rushing defensive tackle from the 49ers. That was, in my opinion, a big free agency splash for the Minnesota Vikings. I know that there were some names being bantied about once free agency started, but if you look at the two defensive stalwarts that we put on our defensive line in terms of Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, compared to what we had to work with last year, I mean, you can end the conversation right now on whether it's the defensive line is an upgrade, right, UP Nation? Like, right now, we can stop the conversation and just look at the defensive line and know that the Minnesota Vikings have made an upgrade in 2025. Then you got Tyron Ingram Dawkins. He's a rookie. Versatile fifth-round pick out of Georgia. And any defensive player on that defensive line, that front seven, linebackers, defensive tackles, defensive end in Georgia under Coach Smart, they're going to be mean and nasty. That any defensive player from Georgia on the defensive line or within that front seven, that they are going to do work. Then you got Levi Drake Rodriguez, who's coming back again. Second-year jump expected. Flashes and limited reps last year. Every time he got his opportunity to go in games and do something, he did it. Taki Taimi, another big body, rotational piece for the Minnesota Vikings. You got Travis Bell on a futures contract, depth, competition. Then you got Jalen Redmond, who I really like. Jalen Redmond made a lot of splash last year when he got opportunity to play. Jalen Redmond is not a scrub. I think when it's all said and done, Jalen Redmond is going to have a role on this team. Even with the names that we brought in, he's a back rotational guy, but he has a strong motor, and he does well in training camp. So I just think he's going to continue to turn heads. Then you have others competing, Elijah Williams, Alex Williams, stuff like that. The 2024 issues is that they really didn't have a dominant pass rush, couldn't hold up against double teams, too reliant on schemes. And when I say too reliant on schemes, again, we talked about the Brian Flores, Dr. Blitzenstein, blitz heavy to stop the run. Can't survive in the NFL in doing that. Our upgrades are Allen and Hargrave. Instant credibility up the middle. Instant strength up the middle, UP Nation. Better rotation, fresher legs. You're going to see fresher legs all season long with all of these pieces moving in and out of the defensive line, fresher legs, and then you're going to have more disruption. So you're probably going to have less blitzing. That's going to help the corners out. That's going to help the safeties out. You're probably going to see more picks from the Minnesota Vikings on defense. Rookie depth, long-term upside for the Minnesota Vikings. That's why they gave Kwesi the bag. He's done a really, really good job with the draft in terms of building that defense and bringing in free agents. Flores can now rely on 3 to 4 players to get home with these exotic blitz coverages that he has. So my question to you, UP Nation, is, again, have we gotten better in 2025 defensive line? You can't win in December if you can't stop the run. And Minnesota learned that the hard way last year. You got to be able to stop the run, UP Nation. Jonathan Allen is the most underrated move of the Minnesota Vikings' entire offseason, in my opinion. Jonathan Allen. Don't be surprised if Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins cracks the rotation by midseason. I think the kid's a stud. What do you think, UP Nation? Did we make another case for improvement with the defensive line unit? I think we did that with the quarterbacks. I think we did that with the running backs. I think we did that with the wide receivers. I think we did that with the tight ends. I think we did that with the offensive line. And I think we made a good case for the defensive line. So when you hear these negatives about the Minnesota Vikings being the worst in the NFC North and one of the worst teams in the NFC, coming off a 14-4 season, all we're talking about right now is upgrades. But what are your thoughts on the defensive line? Did we improve in 2025? Don't just take my word for it. I wanted to hear from UP Nation. I want to hear from the Purple Gang. Have we gotten better in 2025? If we have got better, is it by a little bit or is it by a landslide? My take is we've gotten better by a landslide. But please hit that like and subscribe button, man. This has been Unconventional Playbook. Just takes a minute to hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps the channel out, and I'm going to continue to give you the content that you want. And as always, UP Nation, we will make sure to see you when we see you. 2025 defensive line, nothing but studs. Skol!